the world. We're delighted to be joined now. A man I met, but I can't remember where I met him. James Sunderland, a retired Army Colonel and former MP. James, how are you?
Jeremy, I'm well. How are you?
Where did we meet?
All over the place. I've been on your show a few times, I think.
No. School? Local? Where was your constituency? Bracknell?
I was in Bracknell, so pretty close, I think, to you.
Well, you lost the seat, man. What happened to you, James? Come on.
Well, they got bored of me, clearly.
Or maybe
it was a real shame because we came very close to winning the seat back, and Reform split my vote, and there's a 700 vote majority there at the moment, so I'll get it back, Jeremy, don't worry.
Delighted to hear it. James, I'm doing this slightly differently on this show. I know everybody wants to talk about, well, my viewers and listeners want to talk about bins and the MI5 not allowing people in who are not white or who are white and all that sort of stuff. But as a retired Army Colonel and former MEP, just very quickly, and former chair, actually, of the Veterans, chair of the Armed Forces Bill Select Committee, what's your take on Syria, very quickly, my friend?
Jeremy, it's an absolute powder keg. It is momentous. It's been blown up in the media today, but rightly so. Why? Because you've got US troops that are still there in the northeast of the country. You've got Russian bases there that are now unprotected. You've got Israel bombing chemical weapons factories. Assad fleeing to Moscow with his billions of pounds. There is now a huge vacuum in the Middle East, and who knows what's going to happen next.
It would be fair to say that the mad mullahs in Iran have not had a few great months in terms of Israel doing what it's done to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to the Houthis, those terrorist organisations, now one of its major allies, to be... Well, I'd say puppet states, to be fair. I know propped up by Russia, but the mad mullahs of Iran have been financing and sticking out. Do you think that makes any difference? Do you think that if countries look at Syria, who may be under a dictatorship, do you think this lights a spark, or do you think this is a one-off?
No, I think this is indicative of a much wider pattern. It's fascinating, isn't it? Since the Hamas attacks on Israel on 7th of October, you've got this extraordinary change. Israel has successfully prosecuted campaigns now against Hamas, against Hezbollah, against the Houthi as well. And what's interesting is that axis is very fragile. Iran is needed to withdraw from its proxy support. You've got Russia failing in Syria, with Assad's regime failing. I think we look at these countries and think that they're strong and they're powerful, they're well-funded with big militaries behind them. I think the reality is quite different. I think they're quite fragile. And actually, you look at the effect that Israel and its military forces have had across the Middle East. Even today, with seizing parts of the Golan Heights and bombing Syrian chemical weapons depots, Israel is determined not to open up another front in the Middle East, and Israel will do what it needs to make sure that rebels in Syria don't pose a threat to Israel.
It could lead to a serious spike in so many things. We'll definitely keep an eye on that. James, as a former Tory MP who lost his seat by 700 votes, you'll understand that whilst the people who listen and watch this programme and this station are obviously concerned, there are things closer to home that do their bleeding head in. I'll start with the information today from the West Midlands Ambulance Service that people who dial 999 there, even if you've had a heart attack or a stroke due to lack of ambulances, please get to hospital in a taxi. I don't want to rant too much. It's 5:30. And this is not at Keir Starmer's door. This is at your party's door and party's vote. It is an absolute disgrace to me that people of any age... I mean, we had a woman on whose husband died in her arms because the ambulance in part didn't arrive. How the hell have we got to a point like this, James, where we are letting down the very people who have paid in for years and years, and the very least they can expect is the quality of service? Is it that we've had the NHS on this pedestal for so long and it's just broken and it needs dealing with aggressively if needs be? I don't know. It's an appalling story, pal.
Yeah, look, I don't want to get political here, but I think that ultimately this is a team effort now. This is about politicians. This is about the nation coming together, forming, call it a tiger team, and working out how best the NHS goes forward. It is quite clear that the NHS is no longer fit for purpose in the sense that demand for its services is just too great. I think we should have been more honest as politicians when the Conservatives were in government. I've got no problem at all with the better use of private facilities to deliver public outcomes. We are pumping billions and billions of pounds every year into the NHS. It's extraordinary. The issue is not money, it's how it's run. And I think we need to better hold NHS executives to account. But quite clearly, Labour came into power promising the earth. They completely ignored the effect of the winter situation on the NHS last year. They blamed the Conservatives for it. And how quickly the tide has turned barely 5 months into a Labour government.
But, I mean, you also made the point, and I don't want to get too political, but you made the point. You talk about cross-party referencing. I couldn't agree with you more, but why didn't somebody have the intelligence, be it in the Tory government, the coalition government, Blair's government, to go, this is going to be a disaster? You said something that I'm quite happy to talk about. It's it's giving out too much. Is it giving out too much to people who don't actually damn well deserve to get treatment? This free at source, I think, is being taken advantage of, James. And when I hear of old ladies or old gentlemen of 80 who've paid in for 35 years lying on the floor of their flat or their house unable to get the treatment, I think that's disgusting. As a society, that embarrasses me.
Jeremy, I'm going to say it for what it is. I'll be blunt with you as well. If you increase the size of a population of a country, if you have effectively open borders, if you are not dealing with a situation where small boats can come with impunity to the UK, demand on our services increases. I'm sorry, but the UK, we are now writing cheques that we can't cash. We have outgrown ourselves. The population for our small island is just too big. And what we have to do now is worry about protecting and looking after the population that we've got in the UK, not pandering to those who want to come here and use our facilities for free.
Listen, I reckon if you spoke that sort of language, you'd get re-elected. He's telling me there's breaking news, but it's not on my screen. I want to ask you the other thing here, pal. As a former military man, Britain's intelligence services, oh, God, last one. Oh, hold on, this is breaking. It's just come up, James. Your response, the Home Office has paused, we've just heard, decisions on Syrian asylum claims whilst we assess the current situation, a spokesman said. That's an interesting one. The Home Office has paused decisions on Syrian asylum claims because of what's happened in Syria. But it's taken that to get the Home Office to get its head out of his backside and do something about just one part of the problem. What does that tell you, James Sunderland?
Well, it's a funny old thing, isn't it? I think the Home Office should have had a plan for this. It shouldn't be pausing decisions. We should have stopped it months and months and months ago. Absolutely. Ultimately, the UK cannot be a safe haven for all those overseas who want to come here. We have got to close our borders now. The Conservatives almost did it with their Rwanda plan. That would have had a deterrent effect. But we've seen in the last 5 months, Labour completely failed.
But I'm going to take you on there, and I'd love your response because you're free of being an MP. I'm not complimenting two-tier Keir the farmer harmer. I hate him, right? I make no thing of that. And I was a traditional Tory voter who unashamedly will tell you I voted Reform because I believe that Reform is not a far right-wing party. I believed at the last election it was speaking the very language that I was brought up to believe in, which is a strong military, not fear on the streets, police, men and women on the streets, intel, communications, arresting, serve your sentence, low taxation, all those things. But here's the thing, you just said it, in terms of us as a country, I believe we're too soft. I think half the immigration problem, James, is that, people go, I'm escaping a war-torn country. No, you're not. France isn't war-torn. You know you are not going to get a tent on a beach in the United Kingdom. You're going to get probably a 4-star hotel. And although I've got an issue with that, I've got an even bigger issue when I hear of pensioners freezing to death and veterans on the streets and people like the woman's husband who worked for 30 years lying in his house having a heart attack and no bugger sending an ambulance. That's why it winds me up.
I agree, Jeremy. I'm a centre-right Conservative. I'm a proud Conservative. But there are things that we should have said and did not say. And in my view, we have got to make sure now that we do start looking after the British people. Yeah. It's about the British people. It's not about offering safe haven to those coming into the UK. How many safe countries do these people pass through before they try and cross the channel? We need to be saying it as it is. Reform at the moment are saying it as it is. So my take right now is that the Conservatives need to be an effective opposition. We need to say it as it is. We need to occupy the ground that's currently been occupied by Reform. And we need to be a credible party again, whereby we are competent, we say it as it is, we are honest with the British people, and we are electable. And no doubt at all that in 4 years' time, Starmer will be there for the taking. Labour have been awful. They will be awful. The question is now, who fills that mantle in 4 years' time?
James Sunderland, a real pleasure. We'll have you on again, my friend. Retired Army Colonel and former Tory MP for Bracknell.